Hi, Lacey. Thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time to talk about mental health. And from my understanding, you have had experience with mental health from an early on stage in your life. Can you tell me the first time that you either thought about accessing mental health or went to a therapist or thought about getting help?
Sure, yeah. I think I would say like the first time that I really thought about getting help, I was probably around 12 years old. And I really like thought about getting help, but at the time I didn't know the resources for that. And so at 13 is when I went to my first therapist. And that was not like I wasn't ready for my first therapist. Um, Maybe like 12, I don't know. But I wasn't ready for my first therapist. And then at the end of the year, like, is when I went to AA for the first time. And that really opened up the doors for me. So I started therapy at 13, like officially, seeing someone weekly. And
And was that something you wanted or something that your parents put you in or
yeah,
encouraged?
no, it was something I wanted. I didn't really, I wasn't sure like necessarily how to access that, but I did like find a therapist at 13 and I'm not sure who helped me get there initially with this like first person, which I don't remember a lot, but by the time this is like so hard because there's so many things like my dad went to prison at 13. And when he went to prison, the state of Nevada paid for my therapy for 1 year for their like victim witness assistance program. But 1 year was like not enough therapy for the first 13 years of my life. And so I, met one of my teachers in high school. She was like sort of a second mom. And she's like, here's a place you can go waitress to make money. And here's a therapist you can go see. And so I started working and then paying this lady $80 a week to see her like when I was 14. So that was like the beginning of my therapy journey, I would say.
So you knew that you needed some help processing all of this that much that you were willing to go get a job to help pay for the cost.
Yes. Like my mom, I don't think it was really on her radar. Like no one in my family has ever talked about mental health or like dealt with their own mental health. I've had like two uncles and a grandfather, all three commit suicide in my lifetime. And so there's never been anyone to like deal with it. They just kind of put it in a box and put it away. So I was really lucky to have gone to AA initially, but then met a ton of adults who were rooting me on in order to, not turn into those statistics of what happens to you when you have this type of like life or childhood. So I did get like steered in proper directions, but yeah, like I paid, it's funny, I paid almost exactly what my dad owed in child support in therapy costs by the time I was 18. like he never paid it. It was like 17,000 some dollars that I paid of my own money before I was even 18 for therapy. And I always laugh because he still like never paid it. So I'm like always just like, it's very interesting.
So it sounds like early on you had a lot of trauma that you dealt with that
Definitely.
put you in the path of seeking out mental health.
Yeah, definitely. I think by the time I was 13 and I finally went to AA, I had already been like in the mental hospital twice, like tried to commit suicide multiple times. I was like self-harming and I was strung out on meth, like shooting up dope with old men, like homeless by choice, living in trucks in orange fields in California. And I had lived an entire life before I even got to AA. And then found therapy. So it was like, there was a lot. Yeah.
Did anyone know at that time what had happened to you or what you were going through, or they just saw this acting out?
Yeah, no, they saw the acting out. My dad was, he got caught. That's how no, I never told anybody. And, I mean, actually that's not true. So like, when I went to like hike through the forest camp, I told one of the counselors there what happened, but they never reported it. When I went to the mental hospital, I told them what happened, and they sent CPS to my school. And when CPS came to my school, I just said, no, that never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. I must have just been crazy. So I had attempted to like tell people what was going on, but nobody actually knew the severity and what happened. And, you know, when they found out, it was kind of, my dad had gotten arrested and they found a safe with all these videotapes in them. And that's how he got caught, was he videotaped it. Like from when I was a kid all the way, you know, he started molesting me when I was 3 wow. until I was 12. And he's the first person that, like, I had done like drugs and drank before, but at 11 years old, that guy like taught me how to cook, smoke, and sell crack with him.
Oh, wow.
Because when I was with him, nobody would like try to kill him or mess with him because he had his little daughter. And then we'd leave, cook, get high together, and then he'd like molest me. And I couldn't tell anybody. He was like my hero. Like he taught me too that like there would be consequences if I ever told, for him and me. And that from a young age, he told me like my only purpose on this earth was to please men, and he was going to show me how. And so I moved to California when I was 12 and got like away from him. And in only 1 year, he like got caught and went to prison because he was videotaping it. Like he had a meth lab in his house, like all this stuff. So he got caught for a lot. And, you know, that's how my mom found out. Was the police called her and said, hey, you have to come to the police station. We happened to be in Vegas for Christmas. We went for Christmas to, which is like a whole nother story. The way that they dealt with that shit was way worse than even like, you know, all the other stuff, like going there. You know, they separated us all, me and my sister and my mom, put us in a room by myself with a male detective who showed me these videotapes of myself and asked me to identify them. Took me to Child Haven, and my dad used to say, that's where they put bad kids in cages, is at Child Haven. So I had, even though I'm 13 and I think I'm an adult and I'd be smoking crack and all this stuff, I was like terrified to go to Child Haven. And then there is like, you know, they did a physical exam with using a video camera, like making me see it again, like the inside of myself on video. So the whole thing was like way worse.
A trauma in itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so after that, like, you know, we had to go to the hearing, we had to go to the trial, and they had, like the most satisfying part of it was they offered him 15 years and he said, no, take it to trial. And then he ended up with 32 life sentences based off the evidence. And I was like, cool. Like, that's like the one thing that came out of that was, you know.
So basically 32 life sentences, you know, in your heart that he's not going to be able to hurt anybody else. He's in there.
Yeah, and he had like for a long, I don't know, you know, the laws change over the years. So he had like without parole. But then last year he had a parole hearing for the first time. And so like I attended, I read my statement. It was the first time I'd seen him in 20 years, you know. Wow. So it was like, and it was also interesting because it was the first time, like, even though we all went through court together, everyone was subpoenaed. So no one in my family could be in the courtroom when I was giving testimony. No one was there. And so we never talked about it. My mom, my sister, me, no one ever spoke about it again after court. I like went on to share my story multiple times and talk about it. But his parole hearing after 20 years was the first time my mom, my sister, anybody had like heard actual details of what happened to me based off me giving that testimony or whatever that's called when you talk at a parole hearing. Like,
how was that?
It was honestly like, it was so intense. I was so nervous because I hadn't seen him. And even though he wasn't in the room, they did it on video because like COVID. It was interesting because I was able to let go of so much after that. Like seeing his reaction, one, in the beginning, you know, they said, do you have anything to like say for yourself based off like what you've done? And he literally said, yeah, I'm really sorry to my friends and my family and my children, like like that. And I was like,
nonchalantly, like,
wow, you know, and just knowing like too, he's the like head honcho of prison, the pastor of the whole prison, you know, one of those. And I was just like, man, that's your life. I had no like connection after that anymore. I was kind of just like, he's still, I offered him over the years many times to like admit what he's done, to like, go, at least say something, at least say sorry. And he never ever took those opportunities. Like I'd write to him and use like my work address or something to return. And he'd write back like a Christmas card that just says like, Merry Christmas, love, Dad. Like nothing in response to what I'd say. So I was like, okay, this is more of, it's a really confusing pathway because it's like this person took care of you for a long time, but also like manipulated you for a very long time. Yeah. And then, you're supposed to have love for your parent. And I just had to totally detach from that. I ended up like adopting a different dad in life and, like moving on, but it is, I don't know. It's just really like intense too.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you said, because I think it's, very important. Many survivors, of abuse, at some point there tends to be a time that they want to confront or hear the words of the person who abused them, that, they admit that they did wrong, they hurt them, something, like you said, anything more than a Christmas card, love, Dad, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things we do discuss a lot of times in therapy, because many times those survivors will never get it. They'll want it. And it's just kind of reliving that trauma, that hope that they'll get some closure or something. And the abusers don't get it. And I often wonder, I don't know the right answer just because I don't have that type of brain, but if that's the only way that they can continue to live with themselves after they've done something like that, is not facing it, kind of denying it, not admitting it.
That makes a lot, and honestly makes a lot of sense, because I think my dad's whole side of the family, like, because no one was allowed in the courtroom, they were just shocked. My dad was one of those people that was like Mr. Vegas, like he's a lighting director for all these fancy shows on the Strip. He does so much. And then everyone was just like shocked that this could be real. And he has two sisters. One is a half sister, one is like a full sister. And my aunt, that's his full sister, worked at the courthouse at the time, and the bailiff was her friend. And so she got in and she saw the videos and she never spoke to him again. The rest of his family completely disowned me and my sister and said, you put our son in jail and we like hate you forever. So not only did I like not have even acknowledgement from my dad, I had lost his entire side of the family except for one aunt who like stuck by me. Yeah.
And I want to interrupt you just one time there. That is one thing that I just want to stress, is actually one of the most traumatic things that can happen besides the actual act, the abusive act that happens to people, is when they're not believed.
Totally.
Dealing with that, processing that can be even harder for those survivors, because it's just like when it's out there and then to not be believed on top of it is just...
It's painful. And I think like I'm unique in a way that I took all of that and I was like, cool, you don't believe me, like I'm going to keep going. And, and then that's when, like, when I got to high school, I didn't end up going to like a regular high school. I went to one of those like bad kid continuation schools immediately. And I was like the first 9th grader in history to ever go without going to regular high school to that school. But when I got there, it was amazing because it was very small. The teachers were really supportive. The whole staff was supportive. They had support groups. They're this new model that they had like a bunch of trained therapists and facilitators that would facilitate support groups all day, every day at school. 90% of the school voluntarily went to support groups, and they hadn't had a fight there in over 20 years. Wow. And in the early 2000s, that was kind of like intense. Yeah. And so that's where, I got trained to become the youngest support group facilitator in San Diego County. And it was because of that exact reason. Like, I started to share my story. We had like a domestic violence awareness street fair that would happen in the town. And like, I went on stage and read this poem I wrote about my dad, and all these kids from my school were there. And they started to come up to me, these girls would say, me too. And I've never told anyone. What do I do? Some of them still lived with their abuser. And so I started to like file police reports with them. Like, let's just at least get it reported so that they can't hurt anyone else. Or if they do, there will be a track of history of them actually like having this abuse. Some of them still had to live with those people, had mothers who were like, you're disgusting. Like, that's not true, and didn't believe them. And it was very, interesting to me because I started to go really deep into like the statistics and history of what happens to you when you're molested as a kid. And I kept seeing the same thing over and over. You become a drug addict, you molest kids yourself, you marry somebody who molests your kids, or you just like totally dissociate, you go on welfare, you have 10 kids. Like, there's all of these things. There was nothing positive at all. And I was like, this is wrong. Like, it needs to change. And I don't know where I got the desire to constantly like go hard at like healing this stuff. But I know that affected a lot of people's lives. They started sending girls from other schools, other districts over to this group. And that's the reason I got trained and started the group, was like filing police reports wasn't enough because they still weren't being believed. Therapy wasn't like a thing really yet. It was for like people who were getting divorced. It wasn't for like anyone else at the moment. And so, I think that's one of the biggest things that led me into actually like this healing journey, which ebbs and flows too. It's not like I just went to therapy and got better. Like,
good.
That's not,
you get a certificate and you're good for the rest of the time.
Yeah.
I do want to point something out. I love the fact that you said, in a sense, kind of what I heard is that you found this purpose, like a way for you helping others, whether it, kind of gave you that step to continue your healing path, or a purpose of, a lot of times I find, I guess what I'm saying is survivors will often say like, why did this happen to me? And they have to have some kind of answer, a reason why, you know, it has to make some sense. Not that it ever is going to make sense, but a reason, and helping others seem to be that reason for you.
That's definitely true. And, I did have like an experience, it is very weird that in 8th grade, I joined AA. Everyone was like, I spilled more than you drank, like blah, 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 and, I remember like in the 12 steps, they have a 4th step where you like, I'm resentful at, this is why, this is what it affects. And then this is my part. And when I got to that, I'm in 8th grade writing a 4th step. I'm resentful at my dad because of this, and this. He did all this stuff to me. It affects every single part of me. Yeah. And then my part was blank. And I was like, what is my part? What did I do in this? This doesn't make sense. I don't have a part. And then I had a really amazing sponsor at the time. And she said, literally your part is what you choose to do with that from now on. Like, you can be a victim forever, or you can like take what happened to you and like use that experience in many ways. But if you continue to like react out of what he did, like that's where your part comes in. And it like exploded my brain at 14 years old, because I was like, oh, now I have a responsibility in this. Though I'm not responsible for what happened to me. I'm definitely responsible for what I do with it from now on.
I didn't ask for this, but I can take some of that power back by choosing how I respond, what I do here for.
Exactly. And so that was kind of one of those things where like, I didn't really need to know a why. I honestly now at this point in life, I'm like, I don't want to say like grateful for what happened to me, but also like grateful for what happened to me, because honestly, I don't think I would have become who I am without those like horrific experiences, but they gave me, the trauma to like, I don't know, the trauma to help other people who've gone through the same thing. And when I think about it, like every one of those girls that came to that group, like none of them made it out the way that I did. None of them. They're all like drug addicts, dead kids, people molested their kids. Like, so it's.
And you're right about that stat. A lot of times if you've been molested and then have kids, the odds of them being molested, the children being molested, go up.
Totally.
So
and I thought about my mom, my grandma, they all were sexually abused as kids. And I don't, though I don't have kids myself, I chose to end up like I don't know, my purpose is bigger than just having one kid. You have to focus your whole life on kids when you have kids. And I think that I have enough like to help many, many people and affect many kids' lives just without having to like birth my own children.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
I want to go back to one thing too. You didn't naturally fall into drugs. Your dad, your abuser, took you on that path.
Sort of, in a way. I mean, I saw growing up, my dad was always doing drugs. There's always drugs around the house. But he gave me like alcohol for the first time at 6 years old. And then when I moved, you know, I would go back to my mom's house. We had this, it was such a contrast. Like my dad lives in the ghetto. His house looks like shit because he's a drug dealer now. And like people are in and out all the time. Everything's like dead. My mom's house was like this beautiful big custom home that was like a whole happy family. You know, they have a liquor cabinet. And so I would go out in the middle of the night, like 6, 7 years old, because I was in so much pain already at that point. And when I found like you can disassociate or you can drink alcohol and disassociate much faster and easier than dissociating. So like I would drink myself to sleep. I would go out and steal liquor and drink myself to sleep. And that was kind of like the beginning of that. And so I met all the kids in the neighborhood and tried drugs. But really like in 6th grade, I was 11. I got suspended from school for getting drunk before school. And when my dad found out, like my mom, she was like, punish me, clean the whole house. You're suspended. You're now with your big sister and you have to be with Jessica every day and like not do anything. And I was like, cool. But then my dad found out and he was like, well, what else have you done? He became curious. Like he said, you know, what else did you do? And I was honest with him because he was a cool guy. He was a cool dad or whatever, even though he was doing horrible stuff. And so, that's when it got like way worse. Like that's when it moved into like actual like intercourse and actual like smoking drugs and like
everything got stepped up at that point.
Because I told him, I was like, I've tried all this stuff. It's cool. I could do it. Anything to get me out of this body faster. Like I was so horrified that I was just born in this body, had to experience things because of this body. Like I was so convinced, you know, that was like why. I was supposed to be a boy, not a girl. Like, what am I doing here? You know? And so it was very, I don't know. It's just very intense to like, just learn how to check out that young. Yeah.
And then also being told like, this is like your training time. I'm teaching you.
Yeah, exactly. So it took, you know, obviously like destroyed many of my attempts at relationships over time. I have lots of therapy about that too. Yeah. You know, and I still, even to my last relationship, like pick someone just like my dad, minus like the kid stuff, you know, but still like a drug dealer, like convict, like horrible person, you know, everyone thought was great, but because he could like manipulate. So, I mean, yeah.
And going to that, you know, a lot of times when kids have trauma or dysfunction in the family or issues with parents, they will try to play out those things in their adult relationships. So you had a lot to work out in your adult relationships.
I really did. I was surprised because I never like became like promiscuous or a party girl or any of that. I had lots of multiple like long-term relationships, but they were with people who totally didn't value me and like used me for everything that they could, just the same way my dad did. You know, so it was just a lot. Now I have 3 requirements for dating, which
Tell me, I want to know.
At this time, it's like impossible to find. But all you have to do,
nothing's impossible.
All you have to have is your own house with no roommates, your own car, and your own job.
Okay, we're gonna work on those. We're gonna get you a little bit further.
You'd be surprised between the ages of 35 and 45 how hard it is to find a dude not living with their parents or like something, you know.
Lacey, to have we're gonna up your standards there. You deserve more than that.
That's true. Yeah, simple.
Great start.
Simple start.
Room to add. Yeah. So, starting therapy at that early age. Was there any one type of therapy, or how did you find the right therapist for yourself? Any great coping skills you want to share?
Totally. I was so lucky. I was my teacher, who became like my second mom. She was going through a divorce, or, almost divorced. So they were in therapy, and she just sent me to the therapist she had. And so
she's like, go talk to them.
She's like, just go see this lady. And I will forever, ever, never forget her, love her forever. Her name was Bonnie Rumble. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but she was the most amazing therapist I had over the years. But when I went to see her, I was so nervous to start therapy, or just even be in a closed room with an adult, that she was like, okay, I'll meet you in the middle. We'll go to Starbucks downstairs. And she would let me smoke cigarettes and go to Starbucks and like talk outside for a while, for a few months. And then finally I got comfortable enough to go into her office. When I got into the office is when we started doing EMDR. I think EMDR was a great start for me. Nowadays, like, I would never do it again. I believe in neurofeedback 10 times more. When I discovered neurofeedback, that was a whole another conversation we can have. Yeah. But yeah, like the EMDR to start with for me was so great for taking that initial physical response to the trauma away. And it was simple. It didn't make sense at the time. So any like normal people doing it, they're like, why are we doing this? What's happening? I don't want to bring up all these memories. Like, but I trusted this therapist so much that I was like, I'm willing to do whatever you say. Like, I'll go through with it, and I'll give it my all every single time. And so I'm glad I did, because it was the first step to like removing those blocks of being able to like grow and heal as a human.
Right.
Even though I was so young when I started.
Yeah. And I think that's huge, when you're able to have a visual of the trauma or talk about it without that reaction, without freezing, without crumbling, without feeling like you have to run, escape, like you're in a fog, like so many of those feelings that people will describe. And that's a very common question that I'll get is, will this trauma ever go away? Will I forget about it? Will it be like it never happened?
Yeah.
And I think some people really want that, but unfortunately that's not necessarily the case.
12 steps, leadership, medication, etc. Like anything you could think of. I've probably tried it to, overcome a lot of this stuff. And then now I have found dynamical neurofeedback. When I found neurofeedback, that was a game changer for me, because it literally took out the practitioner. I was able to hook myself up, and I didn't have to re-traumatize myself by bringing up old memories. And that was kind of the thing with EMDR, was like, it was difficult because you had, or not you, but I had to go and think about like something traumatizing, and then go through, multiple sessions with all these different memories, where in using this type of neurofeedback, what it does is it sort of just takes a mirror and holds it up to your brain, right? Your brain has been busy processing everything around you, always looking outward, processing, surviving, creating those pathways for survival. But all of a sudden, it stops it in its tracks, like down to the millisecond. It says, hey, brain, do you want to do this or this? And your brain is going to always choose what's best for it. It's not, in that moment. And it will choose survival pathways if that seems what's best for it in the moment. But now when it's like interrupted and forced to actually choose a different pathway, that's what started happening. So I did feel like I started creating new neural pathways in my brain that allowed me to actually have boundaries effortlessly. Like nothing was hard. It just sort of changed. And I started to be able to react to life differently. And I don't know if that's how it kind of like goes for every single person, or if because I had already done so much work on myself throughout the years that is the thing that changed it. Yeah. And also like a combination of that neurofeedback, Psilocybin has also been life-changing, and I've never taken enough to like trip out or whatever, but I've definitely gone through phases where I've tried like small doses,
The microdosing.
and it feels just like I took a pill that magically cured my depression, like is sort of what it feels like. And so in those moments, that was the first time my body was able to relax. My body was able to not have to be on guard 24/7, where I didn't even know that that's how I was reacting to life. But 10 years before, I was blacking out sober. I was disassociating so hard. Like I'd be driving to work and then I'd be in the back room of work, no idea where my car was parked, but sober. And now, I don't have to leave my body all the time. It allowed me to just calm down enough, calm my nervous system down enough to say like, you don't have to live this way. And I took charge of my own healing in that capacity. It was practitioners are amazing. Therapists, people that are in this field are amazing. But there is something really powerful about removing that practitioner and being able to like take charge of my own healing journey with like this device, Does that answer that?
Yeah,
So I went on a lot.
No. And one thing that I kind of want to point out too is you've tried several things, not just one thing. So I love you being able to share this with everybody. Now, I want to go back to the word neurofeedback and hooking yourself up. Sometimes people are like, whoa, I don't want anything touching my brain. That sounds scary. Yeah. Can you kind of describe that? Because I think it's not as scary as it sounds.
Yeah, it's definitely, I was nervous at first too. And there are multiple kinds of neurofeedback that exist in the world. It is just like EMDR 25 years ago was a new hot thing and now everybody does it. It's sort of like that where it's like, it's only about 30 years old, the technology. But the hooking myself up part, people always ask me that, like, what are you doing to my brain? And it's literally just like a small EEG device that listens to the cortical activity. So the way that my device works is you'll put these little sensors like with paste on your head in certain spots and on your ears. And those sensors are listening for the cortical activity in your brain movement down to the millisecond. And there's music playing in the background. That music interrupts down to the second that it detects that movement. So that's where the interruption is happening.
Okay.
And just like, I don't know what other kind of therapy it's called, where it's like you're constantly interrupting that pattern and pathway. Yeah. That's what it's letting your brain do. But because no one's doing anything to you, it's just listening and offering that feedback in the background. So your brain's going to hear that feedback and be interrupted right in that moment and say, wait, which way? Wait, which way? Over and over and over. And over time, it can just totally create these new pathways and movements to be able to like open up parts of your brain that may have been stuck or created because of like survival mode. But there really is nothing happening to you. It's just offering feedback down to the millisecond of that activity of your brain in order for it to make its own decisions. Okay. Where if your brain's been in survival mode or you've been like high cortisol your entire life and you've never really been able to make those decisions, it's just going on survival mode. Right. It's now saying, wait, you don't have to be in survival mode. Which direction do you want to go? It's up to you.
So it's kind of giving your brain that pause, that stop sign, right there in that moment where then you can create a different path to go down and you don't have to just respond in that fight or flight, stress, trauma response.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what would have happened without it. And how like just much with, my 10 sessions that I originally did really changed the way that I react to life just naturally. I thought, wow, I've tried to do this in therapy for years and years and years, or in self-help groups or in programs or whatever. I've tried to like change it and it just, some part of it was still stuck. It felt like someone had like opened the sky to a whole new color that I had never seen before because suddenly like I was in charge and I had never been in charge before or felt like I was in charge,
And that is a very powerful moment, especially for survivors, trauma, to feel like you're in control. You have that power. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One last question, and I think you're the perfect person to answer this. Many people get very discouraged when they try therapy and they don't connect with a therapist or that technique. You've tried many different things. So what advice would you give to somebody if they've tried therapy and it just wasn't a good fit in that moment, in that time?
Yeah. Honestly, my advice is like, not everybody's for everyone. Yeah. And not every treatment works for everyone. Not every protocol works for everyone. Not every pathway works for everyone. So, I think the reason I became so successful on this journey was because if I didn't like something or it didn't feel right, I found someone else. I always found someone else. Like, even if I felt times where like, I don't need to be in therapy anymore, I'm fine, I don't need this whatever, I find so much value in having an outside person that doesn't really have anything to do with your life to give you a different perspective, that if you don't like one person's perspective, there's 1,000 more people out there willing to help you. So I always encourage people to like try everything. Like try everything. Not everything is going to work. I don't like every kind of food, but I still try every kind of food until I find what I like. Analogy. So that's always like try everything, because there are a million different pathways out there to this like healing journey, to reclaiming yourself, to becoming a human again. Like I didn't know if I was ever going to even be able to walk in a public place by myself. And now, like, I have no problem going out in public by myself. I finally feel safe in my body. But it took years and years of trying everything in order to get to that place. And it's possible for anyone. Like, you're not special. There's nothing that anyone has gone through that someone else hasn't either gone through or could relate to or, help with. And so that's my biggest thing to everyone is like, even if you go backwards or feel like you're going backwards, like, there's always a way to get out and move forward, like every single time. So
beautifully said. I agree completely. And that was perfect. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today. A lot of valuable information, and I can't thank you enough. One last thing. Do you have a favorite joke?
Oh my God, a favorite joke.
Yeah.
I don't
know any. I only know one, and I can't remember them, so I always just like to ask.
Oh, okay.
You got one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, why was 5 and 6 afraid of 7?
Oh, I know this one. Because 7, 8, 9.
That's my favorite joke. Totally.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.